exciting.
All right. Welcome to the first interview type of thing. I still haven't figured out the name yet. Maybe Ivory Tower or Apostrophe Philosophy interviews. I'm not sure. Anyways, I am joined here by Kyle. Say something about yourself.
Yeah, I'm a PhD student at the University of Canterbury, studying for my PhD in philosophy in Kantian meta-ethics specifically, looking at constitutivism, which is a recent development in normative theory and moral philosophy, and I am quite enjoying it. I'm coming to the end of it. My submission date is New Year's Eve, end of this year. Kind of a cruel submission date, I think, New Year's Eve. But yeah, I've been thoroughly enjoying it so far, and that's...
Yep. Okay, hold on, wait. We need to bring the Iceaxe first.
The Iceaxe,
that needs to be on the table, yeah.
Right.
Before we start, we need the Iceaxe and...
Yes, so I've got three props with me. I've got two books to hold up the microphone, and also because they're my favourite books.
What does the book say?
Yeah, I've got The Critique of Pure Reason by Kant.
Yes.
And I've got The Sources of Normativity, which is Korsgaard's work. And that's, I think, the best presentation of constitutivism, of this recent development in moral philosophy. It's a development on Kant's tradition because it's... I would like to explain it as a new formulation of the categorical imperative. That's what I reckon she's done. That's not how she explains it, though. And the other prop I have...
Yeah, scary looking...
Yeah, it's an Iceaxe. It's a teaching tool, actually. So this is only tangentially related to my philosophy. So I use this to teach philosophy as part of the PhD process.
So my understanding is that it's normally a tool for mountaineering.
I've never used it for that.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, my father has. It's my father's Iceaxe, but... Now I use it as a teaching tool.
So you're sort of taking it out of the realm of, I suppose, traversing mountains into the realm of, suppose, traversing thought?
Yeah, enlightening all the undergrads. It's crucial. You can't enlighten undergrads without an Iceaxe.
So how is this actually being used?
Okay, so it's not often in teaching, at least as far as I'm aware, that you actually solve one of the problems of teaching. But this Iceaxe, it solves one of the big problems of teaching. Yeah. So one of the big problems of teaching is...
You're still being quite vague.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the big problems of teachers...
Who do you kill?
You could solve the difficult students, I suppose, with the Iceaxe, but
yes, that's what I'm thinking.
That's probably going to be... I don't know, maybe not when you're teaching moral philosophy.
That's the only time you can use it, right? Because you're trying to justify...
Well, so what you do is you bring the Iceaxe up to the front of the class and you tell the students that they have to explain to you why you shouldn't use the Iceaxe on them, with the idea being that if they haven't learned enough of their moral philosophy and they can't apply their reasoning faculties well enough, then they're going to succumb to the Iceaxe.
Is that actually how you teach your students?
No. I probably wouldn't have students for very long if I did. No. So this is an icebreaker. So that's the problem that I've solved. That's the teaching problem that I've solved. How do you have a nice, quick icebreaker that introduces the students to the classroom, gets them in a bit of a mood to participate and feel involved, creates that classroom environment. So what I do is I bring along a tray of ice, and I hide the tray of ice, and I hide the Iceaxe, and I ask the students in their very first class, for a volunteer, I ask for the bravest student to step forward. And after just a brief, awkward period, while I just stand there waiting.
Brief, awkward period, yes.
Yeah. Because they don't want to be called upon right at the start. What does it mean for me to be asking for the bravest student? But eventually the bravest student emerges, and one of them puts their hands up to get rid of the awkward silence, and then I give them the Iceaxe, and they start to look a bit worried, and that's the fun part for me. And then I have them. I bring out the tray of ice, and I have them smash the tray of ice, and that gets exactly what you need from your students, and that is a bit of a groan and a cheap laugh.
And groan and a cheap laugh.
Yeah.
What's this tray of ice? Is it like a tray you put in the fridge, in the freezer?
Yeah.
Wow.
Just like a takeout tray from the night before. Just then.
Do the students get to keep the ice?
I have not had any of them ask yet.
Okay. What is Kantianism? What is constitutivism? And what is Kantian Constitutivism?
Okay, so Kantianism is, or the Kantian strategy of solving philosophical problems, is deriving what exists, so determining and explaining what exists and why it exists, by examining the faculties that we have. So I would examine the faculties that I have as a thinking being, as a rational agent, and I would after undertaking that examination, I would realize that I have the faculty of reason. And so I would examine what must be the case for that faculty of reason to exist. So given that I, a thinking being with the faculty of reason, exists, then there are some things that must be the case. And so I can determine what exists based off of that.
Okay, so that's Kantianism. It's I have a thing, and because I have this thing, some other things must be true, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a transcendental argument, which
Okay.
is a term you'll often hear used in conjunction with Kant. Yeah, so I can transcend my own limitations in a sense by determining what must exist, given that I exist.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. And the next question was, what is constitutivism?
Yeah. So constitutivism is a recent development in moral theory, and it is the attempt to derive the normativity of something, so the morality or what something should do, what something should be, from the nature of that thing. And we can see some Aristotelian hints in there. So applied to something like a chair, to like use an everyday example, constitutivism would look like this. Well, I want to figure out what a chair should be or what a chair should do, and so I'll examine what a chair is. What is the nature of a chair? The nature of a chair is that it solves the problem of needing to sit down. What does it need to be in order to solve the problem of needing to sit down? Well, it needs to be the appropriate height, it needs to be sturdy, and it needs to be comfortable. So that is the normativity of a chair. A chair should be something that is the appropriate height, sturdy and comfortable. And the idea behind constitutivism is that we can apply that to people too. What should a person do? Well, they should do what is constitutive of being a person. And that is how it links to the Kantian tradition. So Kantian constitutivism is looking at a person and figuring out what is constitutive of them. So what is constitutive of you, what is constitutive of me, what makes us at our core what we are, what is our deepest identity in a sense. And that is our faculty of reason. So what makes us what we are, which is thinking beings, is our faculty of reason. And we can see now the connection to the Kantian tradition, where they're using those transcendental arguments to figure out what must be the case in order for there to be rational thinking beings.
So Kantian constitutivism, the Kant part comes because it comes from Immanuel Kant, famous
Yep.
German philosopher, right? Or was
Correct.
it Prussian or something? Yes. Okay, famous German philosopher, and the idea is that we use reason to find out our ethical system.
Reason obligates us to do certain things.
Yep.
It obligates us to follow the categorical
Yep.
imperative.
It's a sort of Vulcan ethics.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm sort of negotiating myself around the world, finding out what to do, is this something that would help me personally, or is this sort of something in the abstract?
So
I suppose a better way to phrase this is, why do you care about this?
So there's two reasons to care about it, and a good reason not to care about it, but I'll give the two reasons to care about it first.
Two reasons not to care. Okay.
Yeah, so the first reason is that, the idea is that this could govern your everyday behaviour. So you might care about it because you can use it to actually decide what to do in your day-to-day life. And that would look like facing a moral problem, facing a decision you have to make, and making that decision by imagining what you would have other people do if they were in the same situation. So ask not what I want to do myself, but what would I have everyone else do? And you might ask that by saying something like, if everyone did what I'm about to do, how would the world look? Would the world function well? Would the behaviour make sense if everyone was doing it? So that's how it might govern your behaviour. The second reason to care about it is because the theorists that are working in this area, they might be right. And by that I mean the meta-ethicists, the moral philosophers, they're trying to figure out why morality exists, why meaning exists in the world, why some things are good, other things are bad, and what we should do given the sense in which morality exists. So that's the meaning of life, right? Like that's trying to figure out why your life has meaning and what your purpose is. So if the neo-Kantians are right, or the Kantian constitutivists, if they're right about their theory, then you should care a lot because they've figured out the meaning of life. And the reason that you might not want to care about it, that reason that maybe you shouldn't care, well, they also may very well be wrong. So it's far from settled in that sense. There's still a lot of work to be done in Kantian Constitutivism.
What would you say are the biggest problems with Kantian Constitutivism? Or rather, your theory in general?
Yeah, so I think the biggest problem facing Kantian Constitutivism is that if we are going to obey the categorical imperative, if we're going to do what we would will other people do in the same situation, because of our nature, because of our faculty of reason, then we're going to need to provide an explanation of why we should endorse our faculty of reason at all. So I might agree that I have the faculty of reason, and I might agree that if I use that faculty of reason within the confines of reason, that it means I should do a particular number of things. I should treat other people the way that I want them to treat me because there's no difference between me and them, that sort of thing. But I might also think that I have no reason to endorse what my faculty of reason endorses. So I might say, okay, my faculty of reason says that I should do X, Y, and Z. Pay my taxes, pick up litter off the street, that sort of thing. But I have no interest in obeying my faculty of reason. I want to obey some of my passions or my desires. I want to do something else.
So that's sort of like a foundation problem, right? Like like infinite regress. Like why do I obey my faculty of reason? Because you should.
Yeah,
Okay.
Exactly right. So it's a problem right at the foundations of the theory is that they're giving an explanation of what normativity is, and in response to their explanation of what normativity is, what morality is, you can say, okay, so why ought I obey my faculty of reason? Why ought I obey the moral laws that you have just prescribed? Now that's going to be problematic for the reason that you just mentioned. It's a foundational problem. They can hardly give you a reason to obey the faculty of reason without going beyond the faculty of reason.
Yep.
And if any reason they give you will, of course, appeal to your own faculty of reason, because their theory is limited to talking about what the faculty of reason prescribes. But if you don't want to endorse that, then it seems their theory doesn't apply to you.
Is there a way you try to fix this, a way you tackle this problem?
Yeah, so this problem, this was presented, the problem I was mentioning before, the one presented in 2006, and there are, I think, some promising solutions, and some of them I'm working on in my thesis where I'm hoping to advance them further. So the way you solve that problem, hopefully, is you point out that you can't do any coherent thinking beyond your faculty of reason. So the idea works something like, as soon as you've engaged in this conversation with me, talking about what you should do, you've already endorsed your faculty of reason. By engaging in the conversation, you are endorsing the same faculties that pose obligations upon you by engaging in any rational discourse whatsoever. Hopefully that sounds like a pretty compelling solution, but there are problems that arise from posing that solution.
Yeah, okay. It's philosophy, so there's sort of problems always, right?
Yeah. Problems all the way down.
Okay, can you give me a sort of a story of Kantian ethics in action? So, for example, someone's just come to my house and they have a gun to me and they're saying, "Give me all your money," or whatever. How does a Kantian constitutivist make sense of this story, and why is that a bad thing? And I suppose, what should the players do here?
Yeah, okay, so...
Does that question even make sense? I'm trying to understand concretely how this plays out.
Yeah, so what the parties involved in this situation are going to be asking themselves. And the idea is, according to Kantian Constitutivism anyway, what everyone is asking themselves all the time, the activity everyone's always engaged in, is constituting themselves. And by that I mean you're making yourself into a certain type of thing whenever you make a decision. And the Kantian Constitutivist is going to argue that what you're making yourself into should be something that is coherent. So the gunman in this situation would need to ask himself when he's making a decision whether or not to follow through on his threat, whether or not to turn around and leave, that sort of thing. He should be asking himself, does this choice make me coherent? And by coherent I mean, does this choice reflect what I would have other people do in the same situation? Because if I couldn't will that other people do, if I couldn't endorse other people doing what I'm doing, then I'm not being coherent. so I'm not using my faculty of reason appropriately. So that's how the Kantian Constitutivists would explain that the gunman should, of course, decide to put his gun away and walk away, because presuming he's there asking for money because, he wants to, go out and pay his rent or pay his phone bill, and he would think, okay, if everyone that needed to pay their rent and their phone bill were to go and rob their neighbour, what would happen? Well, society wouldn't function. I can hardly endorse that without being incoherent, and my faculty of reason demands that I'm coherent. So that's how it would explain that he's in the wrong. Now, if he were, say, getting money to save some big sick orphanage or something, orphanage full of sick people, and he was saving lives, perhaps you could create an argument that that is coherent, that you would will everyone in the situation where they can save a great many lives.
Okay.
Then, yeah.
So do you genuinely believe that people should ask themselves this question, though? What I'm doing is coherent? Or is that rather just sort of like academic lingo for, I suppose, what you want them to ask themselves?
Well,
because it's difficult for me, right, to imagine the gunmen or people asking themselves, okay, is what I'm doing coherent, right? If you're talking about abortion, you're talking about, for example, I might say, okay, abortion is good because it gives the woman choice or something, right? And then are you saying what I should do as a pro-lifer, right? As an example, I should say, am I coherent? Yeah. That seems strange, right?
It seems especially strange for exactly the types of reasons that you're mentioning, because this when I'm saying that this is what you're doing when you're making a decision, it looks like I'm making a psychological claim, right? It looks like I'm describing what you're actually asking yourself, the experience of having a process of deliberation with yourself. And if that's what I'm saying, then it looks like I've just poorly described people's thought processes, because that's not what people do, right? That's not how I decided what to have for breakfast. That's not how I decided how to get into uni today. That's not how I decided how to interact with the people I talked to today. That's not what I actually did. So the argument, according to Kantian Constitutivists, is that it's not about what people actually think. It's about how the process of rational deliberation is supposed to work.
Can you unpack that sentence?
Sure.
Process of rational deliberation.
Yeah. So when you are reflecting on the actions that when you're reflecting on the choices that you have, reflecting on what action you should take, the faculty that you're deploying in order to make that choice, that is the faculty of reason, and the faculty of reason has a particular structure. So rather than a claim about what phenomena you're actually experiencing when you're making a decision, the idea is that Kantian Constitutivism is a description of the structure of that process of reason, the structure of making a decision. And you might not have the experience of engaging with that structure directly, in the sense that you might not actually think, how does this constitute me? And that might be because you're not reflecting as well as you could be. Or it might be because you're representing that structure in a slightly different way, so you're using slightly different terminology, but you are thinking about in some fashion, about the type of person that this will make you into. But if they are correct that is the structure of that decision-making process, and I do think that that's a fairly plausible claim, if they're correct about that, then they've described something about how you should think if you are using the faculty of reason correctly, rather than describing something about how you actually think. So that could potentially be a problem for the theory, because you might find that even if everything they claim is accurate, that this describes a minority of behaviour for a minority of people. Personally, I wouldn't be too surprised if a moral theory, once we've finally worked out the kinks and we have an actual finished moral theory that accurately explains the meaning of life, it wouldn't be too surprising to me if it didn't describe our actual behaviour particularly well. It wouldn't surprise me if most of us do the wrong thing to some extent most of the time. Of course, that's not what we want our moral theory to find.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So, Kyle, what's your PhD about? What's it got to do with all of this?
Right, yeah. So my PhD is looking at a problem that Kantian Constitutivism is facing. That's the problem we discussed before. Why should I endorse my rationality at all? It's examining the solutions that have already been posed to that problem, and developing those solutions further. So it's examining what Kantian Constitutivism.
Say it 5 times really fast, please.
It's an awkward one. The first time I had to present on this was a nightmare. I don't think I said it once the entire time. I went right once the entire time. So it's developing those solutions and helping to solve the problem, and at the very least determine what Kantian Constitutivism needs to do in order to solve that problem. And as well as that, I am putting forward an argument for a scalar deontology. So by a scalar deontology, I mean a theory of morality that is rule-based, that is law-based, so a deontological theory, but that is scalar. So that can explain why your obligation to follow the rules, follow the moral rules, is something you can follow to a greater or lesser degree.
Can you just clarify what is deontology?
Yeah, so rule-based ethics, or a theory of morality that posits that what morality is a set of rules. You might hear it referred to as a duty,
like
or an obligation.
Don't kill, don't lie.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff like this. Yeah,
stuff like that. So it's probably best described as, in the Kantian sense, Kantian deontology, as an obligation that you have to yourself. So you'll hear it described as duty-based ethics. I prefer it explained as obligation-based ethics. So it is the obligation that your faculty of reason puts on you. You have the obligation to be rational and to be coherent, and so to treat others in the same way that you would have yourself treated, and so on.
So you have this new thing called scalar deontology.
Yeah. So there has been an attempt at scalar deontology in the past, which is quite unrelated to what I'm doing. But what I'm arguing in my thesis is that when you are in the position of exercising your freedom, and remember freedom here meaning the position of deciding what you should do, using your faculty of reason. So constructing these rules that you should follow. When you're doing that and you're deciding what you should be, you are deciding what you want to be in reference to that coherent self. And that's what Kantian Constitutivism is arguing more generally, that you should be this coherent self. That you are deciding what to be according to what will make you the most coherent. So rather than strictly deciding whether you're coherent or not, will this make me coherent or not, you're deciding what will make me the most coherent. So this is how you could make sense of notions like, well, it wouldn't be very coherent of me to rob from the store, but it would be more coherent to rob from the store than to, say, murder the shopkeeper and then rob the store. So it can make scalar deontology can make sense of claims that something is more or less coherent. It makes you into a more or less coherently constituted person.
So, and to clarify, we're all striving towards becoming coherent beings.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Okay, and that's a factual statement, right? Like, or is it like an ought statement, like we should become coherent, or is it factual, like we are coherent?
It's an ought statement. So the claim is that our faculty of reason demands of us that we strive to be coherent beings. That's what our faculty of reason is for, is the idea. It's for making us coherent.
Presumably someone with maybe a mental disability would no longer have to follow this? So maybe it's like some sort of schizophrenia where they are not necessarily coherent, or...
So the obligation to be coherent is an obligation placed on you by your faculty of reason. And so it's an obligation that's only placed on you to the extent that you have and can exercise your faculty of reason. So I couldn't speak about the degree to which various impairments can compromise your faculty of reason. It's simply not my area, I don't know. But if there were such an impairment on someone's faculty of reason, it would have the proportional removal of their obligation. So the extent to which they have that faculty of reason is the extent to which they still have that obligation.
Okay. So sort of like a scalar obligation too, right?
Yeah, and that would mean things like people who are better at exercising their faculty of reason have a stronger obligation to be coherent in their everyday activities and their interactions with each other.
So presumably as a PhD philosophy student, you would be one of those top tier people to be able to exercise their faculty of reason.
That's a dangerous thought. Yeah.
Right? So I mean, you're in a university, you're up there. Presumably you should be one of the more, you should be full of normative oughts, right? You should have all these more obligations, right?
So I would have if my faculty of reason were indeed well functioning, hopefully it is, if it were indeed well functioning, then I would have a proportionately high obligation to be coherent. It would be a separate question whether or not I actually fulfilled that obligation, but it would increase my obligation to be coherent.
I find that separate question quite interesting. I'm not sure that's really part of your thesis, but I mean, let's say it's true and we all want to be coherent beings. What's the reason we don't do this sometimes?
Yeah, so
like I want to donate more money to charity, but I don't. Yeah. So why don't I do that? And how can as a future Kantian Constitutivist, how can I fix that?
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, yeah. I mean, well,
I've convinced you, of course. Yeah.
Sure.
So the idea is that you ought to want to be more coherent, right? And that is an importantly distinct claim from the idea that you actually want that. So you might want all sorts of things, like I might want to donut, or I might want to play more games, or I might want to, kind of sleep in more. These are things that I shouldn't want. And by things I shouldn't want, what I mean is my faculty of reason obliges me not to want those things. But the actual wants I have in terms of this psychological phenomena of having a desire to do something, that's distinct from the obligation I have to do something. So it might be the case that none of us want to be coherent. But the claims from Kantian Constitutivists, anyway, are that we should want to. So we have an obligation to, but that's quite different than our psychology actually, in fact, being such that we want to do it.
So that's quite confusing. So rather than saying we ought to be coherent, it's saying we ought to want to be coherent.
Oh no, it is saying that you ought to want. Yeah, both. You ought to want to be coherent. Yeah. And you
also, and presumably, you also ought to want to be coherent, right?
Yes, exactly right. And this is how you might make sense of claims like, well, I want to eat an ice cream, but I want to not want to eat an ice cream. And the idea would be that what might be going on there is that one of those desires is in some way speaking to your obligation to be coherent. So I want to be the type of person that's going to take coherent actions. And by that I mean actions that are coherent with what I would have other people do and with the type of person I would have to be. So I might want to be coherent, but my immediate desire, the want that's actually manifesting itself, and maybe even the want that's controlling my behavior right now, that's just a want for some lovely ice cream, or yeah.
Do you feel like you've described your PhD in some sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're nearly finishing that, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. Submission date at the end of the year, New Year's Eve.
Okay. And then after that, you would have completed an account of Kantian Constitutivism, right?
Yeah.
And then what are you going to do after that?
Yeah, so I mean, the hope, of course, is to get into some form of academic postdoc work. Some form of like lecturing or postdoc research. And I mean, hopefully, my understanding is that the odds aren't great in the sense that there's a high number of people seeking to do that and a low number of people that succeed. So my other thought, the other thing I'm likely to end up doing is teaching high school. And that's what I was doing before I started the PhD, and I really liked it. And that's, the odds are good that I'll end up doing that again, and that would not be something that would upset me. That's
okay. Why do you want to still stick around in the ivory tower?
It's for quite selfish reasons. So the answer I should give, the answer I want to give, is that that's what I am obligated to do. That's what would make me the most coherent person that I could be. But really, I've just enjoyed it so much. It's just been so much fun.
Such a cop-out.
Oh, yeah.
So running a whole PhD on the stuff is telling what people should do and should not do.
Yeah.
And you're almost being a bit hypocritical. You're saying, actually, I'm just selfish.
Oh, it's, well, I mean, if the Kantian Constitutivists are right, and if things have gone really well, and I've helped them in some small way prove that, and the meaning of life has indeed been discovered and will be established, and so on. So even in that perfect case, it's one thing for our purpose and life's meaning to be uncovered. It's quite another to actually motivate us to follow that purpose and act in accordance with that meaning.
Yeah, okay. I'll accept that. Okay, were you a philosophy teacher?
Got the bulk of it.
All right.
Just
So sorry if it looks like everything's changed, but we just had the memory card got full, so now we're going to re-record a bit. So Kyle, were you a teacher? Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Before starting my PhD, I was a high school teacher. My first teaching job, straight out of Teachers College, was teaching high school history.
High school history, okay.
And then after that, I did relief teaching, like day relief, and taught a whole bunch of different subjects.
Okay, was that in New Zealand?
So the relief teaching was in New Zealand, and the first teaching position that I had, the high school history, that was in Khartoum.
Khartoum?
Yeah.
Oh, yep.
So in Sudan, and that was quite that was a good adventure. That was quite good fun.
Do you have any good stories from your teaching experiences there?
I have one teaching story that I quite like from Khartoum that has where the fact that we were in Khartoum is somewhat relevant. So it was actually a story about the classroom of a friend of mine. It was a mate that I went through Teachers College with, and we went over to Khartoum together. And he was teaching in the primary school part of the school that we were at. And I had gotten 2 big bags of candy. I'd organised this with him ahead of time. I had 2 big bags of candy, and I walked up to his classroom door from an angle where the students couldn't see me. But him and standing in front of the classroom, he could. And so I gave the little motion that we'd agreed upon, and I burst in through the door, jumped through the door to the surprise of all the students. I can't remember what year group he was teaching. They might have been about 9 or 10 years old. And I threw him one of the bags of candy. And then the both of us turned to the students and ripped the bags of candy open while thrusting them forward. So showered the students with candy was the idea, just to surprise his class and just throw candy all over the place. That was the idea. But but we had
it's a good class.
Yeah. It was good fun. The students enjoyed it. Kind of. They would have enjoyed it a lot more if we'd done it right. So we made 2 mistakes. The first mistake was that the only candy that I could get there was the only candy I could get were these hard sucking fruit lollies. So they were quite hard candies. And the second part is that I had forgotten part of the everyday surroundings there in the school. They just become part of the background, and that is the ceiling fans. They just they become background noise. You don't even pay attention to them. And so what we did is we threw them up into the ceiling fans, and they're hard sugared candies, and it just turned into just sugar shrapnel, showering the students. And so of course they shouted and yelled and screamed and jumped under their desks, and it was chaos. It was beautiful, enjoyable chaos. The best part actually wasn't the students. It wasn't my.
It was the candy.
It was I suppose. Okay, so the second best part, after the fact that there was candy, was that the teacher aide in Chris's class, the teacher aide in my mate's class, we hadn't told him. He wasn't in on the plan, and his reaction was just so genuine and so beautiful. His mouth was wide open, and he just did not know what was going on, and it was such a confused look of befuddlement and amazement that it really left an impression. It was good fun.
Wow, that's a good story. I mean, it doesn't even have to be in Sudan. It could have just terrorized some students here.
Yeah, I haven't gotten around to that with this quite yet, but maybe there's still time, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us on the first episode of Apostrophe Philosophy Interviews / I don't know the name yet / Ivory Tower Interviews. And thank you so much, Cal, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yep. Is there any way that people could get in touch with you if they would like to know more about Kantian Constitutivism? Yeah,
if you want to talk to me about just philosophy in general or Kantian Constitutivism, just send me an email. I guess I'll give you my email to put in the comments in case people do.
I'll put it in the comments in the description on YouTube.
I could comment on the video with the email.
And then people could view your YouTube channel.
I don't have one.
Oh, well.
Yeah, one day.
Any Kantian stories you would like to share?
What would a Kantian story look like, I wonder? I don't know.
Kantian so imagine the perfect world for a Kantian.
Yeah.
And actually, what would be a Kantian's paradise?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean,
is everyone sort of walking around like the Vulcan, really emotionless, just sort of walking around and then doing ethical good things?
That's what I wondered too. I mean, there's already an idea of what the perfect Kantian world would be, right, in the sense that Kant argues that we should interact with society in the same way that we would have everyone else interact with society. And he puts this forward in the form of the kingdom of ends, is how he describes it. It's a formulation of the categorical imperative. So he says, one way of representing the obligation we have to ourselves to be coherent is by saying that we should, when we're participating in society, act as though we would have everyone else, act in the same way that we would have everyone else act. And by doing that, we will bring about this kingdom of ends. By treating everyone else as an end in their own right, and by acting in ways that are coherent with what we would have everyone else do, we'll create this kingdom where everyone's treated as an end.
Are you going to describe the kingdom now?
Yeah, so what does that kingdom actually look like?
The kingdom of Kyle, like paradise, right?
I mean, before we were talking about your deepest identity, and we were pointing out, the Kantian Constitutivists, through me, I guess, were arguing that your deepest identity is your faculty of reason. So I have to wonder if that entails an obligation to minimise or in some way compromise, remove, minimise those elements of your identity that conflict with that deepest element. Does your faculty of reason obligate you to curtail the elements of yourself that would lead you astray? And if that's the case, then does that mean this Kantian kingdom of ends, this perfect Kantian world, is a world where we've done exactly that? We've minimised those elements of ourselves that impinge on our ability to do what's rational.
I see you're answering the question by raising more questions.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe that's the Kantian joke. There you go.
Is there anyone you think of who can represent the perfect Kantian? Right now, sort of the model Kantian? Do they exist?
I actually hadn't even put any thought to anything like that. I don't think so.
Okay, I mean, I'm trying to visualize the kingdom of ends. Like, presumably be someone, maybe people in the math department, very rational beings.
Maybe. But
or
sure.
Maybe the opposite of politicians. Or maybe...
someone who's treating everyone else the way that they would want to be treated.
Maybe Dalai Lama would be a good Kantian?
I don't know anything about the Dalai Lama, so...
would Hitler be a good Kantian or a bad Kantian?
Presumably he'd be a terrible Kantian. Because,
why would Hitler be a bad Kantian?
Because all the things he's doing are incoherent. He couldn't want everyone else to do the same thing he's doing. Or else everyone else would be killing lots of people and being in charge of other people's lives. Yeah, but maybe you're right. Maybe it would be something like these really dry mathematicians. Our mathematicians really like that, though.
Yes.
Really? Oh gosh.
Yes.
I guess I'm glad I'm not a mathematician.
Yes. No.
But maybe after.
But you should be a mathematician. You should also want to be a mathematician.
Exactly. Maybe that might be what the Kantian Constitutivists have established, that we should be these types of things that actually don't sound that enjoyable.
It's terrible. Yeah.
Well, that might be what follows from your obligation to your faculty of reason. Hopefully not. Surely.
I can't tell if you're being serious or not. Or it sounds like you're still thinking about this.
Yeah. I mean, my thesis is focused on those foundational elements, the metaphysics of it. So how it actually applies is kind of strangely removed from the stuff I'm typically engaged in. But maybe it ends up being quite boring.
I'm interested in how it applies. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm going to go eat dinner.
So. Yeah, sweet. Sounds good.
Good. Okay.